microphone, your phone, to avoid distraction. Please also use the chat to connect and share ideas and resources. In this room, there are lots of people with experience and also working in different organizations that we can all sort of collaborate and explore how we can sort of support this work. And every voice is valued. This is a safe space, and because we have to practice generosity that we're talking about here. So it's a safe space. Feel free to share your voice and share your experience and what you've learned. Also to note and also to get your consent that this session is going to be recorded. The idea is that we have a compendium of information. We will share some videos as well today, but also we're going to extract a few of the conversation here to go mainstream because we can't keep talking to ourselves. We need to talk to other people. We need to make this conversation mainstream because the conversation around generosity for Africa giving, whether in investment or in donation, needs to also now be one at the forefront as things are changing and funds are doing things globally. And finally, we want to take your feedback and love to hear your thoughts on how we can sort of push this forward. What does it look like in terms of collective action? And what can we do as we look at 2026 for the year 2026? So those are some of the housekeeping rules. Feel free to connect with people and also please share. Remember, there's a French option if you want to follow that. Also, just respect people. It's not just a conversation for Africa. And I think that globally, there are different cultures that represent this sort of generosity. What we are just talking about here is that we're bringing some of the things that we have seen work in Africa that we can make become part of our life as things are moving and changing forward. So those are some of the housekeeping rules. And a bit before we jump into the conversation, a bit of proverb. I'm looking at the different, in case I miss anything, please, my support system, please just flag it to me so I can check what the chat is. But I wanted to just share a bit of icebreaker. If you can you share a proverb in your language, in your culture, in your community, or in the work that you have done? Share a proverb that talks about generosity, any proverb, or even the quotes that you have. We would like to hear some of those things. Please put it in the chat. And if there's anyone that that wants to quickly just share one, I'm sure our speaker will have a lot of it before I introduce them. They will share a bit of that. But please quickly let's just have a few proverbs in the group, in the chat, just to see what are some of the proverb that talks about generosity. Because in between a lot of this conversation, as we are, whether in music, in folklore, in stories, in music, African has always sort of translated wisdom in all these formats. So I'm sure if you have different things, we'll be sharing different things. I'm seeing some language. That's great. Thank you so much. Laina, I can't really see very well. I'm sorry. Malagax. Bidem, you have to help me with this language.
I think that is Lalaina from
Laina.
Madagascar. Yes. Hi, Lalaina. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Sean. I am Ubuntu. Yes. 110.29. That's that. Thank you. Amazing. That is keep it coming. I think we need to put all of these proverbs together and make a map of it. Bidemi, we definitely need to do this after. We'll definitely need to do it. Madagascar. Thank you. Okay, amazing. A general person will prosper. Very precious. Thank you very much. That sounds like a scriptural quote, some spiritual quote. So feel free, you can also use that if you have anything from whether in Islam or any religion that you have that talks about that would be great as well. Wow, such an incredible amount of information we are getting. I definitely think we can have a compendium after this of some of these things. Amazing. I wish you can get one person to just give us just in 1 minute why this proverb resonates with you. Just get one before we jump in. Can we get maybe one volunteer? You didn't just any look out for any hand as well. Is there any volunteer that just share about the why for this?
I mean, we can also name someone on the call.
I wouldn't want to put someone on the spot. Thank you, Miriam. I've seen that. I've seen that. Love it. Spend from what you have provided you. Wow, thank you. Anyone who wants to take or should I take the prerogative? Let me see. Let me see. Jacqueline, do you want to tell us what this is in Swahili? Okay. I'm not sure. Okay, thank you. It means savings do not decay. Aha, savings do not decay. All right. Amazing. Sure now. Wow. See what I'm talking about? The generosity already coming out from this conversation is incredible. We're seeing a lot of information that definitely can form a lot from our compendium. Amazing. All right. Thank you. Please keep it coming. Keep it coming. I think it's great that we keep having this information. I think a lot of particularly very young ones who are at their creative stage can really, really can really, really learn from all of these things we're sharing. But I think the Africa representative, if you think about the way we are as a continent and the way we are to ourselves, and the way we accept strangers, and it's many cultures across the world, we've seen those sort of this sort of generosity as well. I think there's something unique in all that we're learning and all we're sharing. But let's quickly jump into the joint introduction, a bit of the different messages that we've gotten. For us to start this, we wanted to take the voices of different people who have sort of like contributed to shaping this conversation that we're going to have today. And they would give us a bit of insight in how we should be thinking about this, because this is not just a conversation that we want to have on this in this webinar. It's something that we want to push going forward for next year and hopefully to 2030, because it's a critical year for the African continent. The AU is thinking about what does it look like for Africa to be able to solve some of these biggest challenges that we're seeing. But before we jump into the quick conversation, it'd be great to have a joint intro message from all our partners. And Bideni, maybe I'll just pause now and allow you to just share these videos before we move to the other part. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wally. I will be playing each video now. Also, please, I'd like some of us to confirm that you can hear audio clearly once this goes live. Thank you so much.
Many greetings from Dakar in Senegal, where I'm speaking to you from. The traditions are very diverse and they are very rich, as we have seen, but the commonalities are also very striking. Just two examples. If you take the case of the story of Malawi, for example, our livestock rearing, and how somebody would ask a person to look after their cattle, or it could be goats, it could be something else, and then get their own hut built up along the way by getting some, a retribution in terms of in kind. We have it in the Fulani of West Africa, the Pole or the Tukulor or whatever you call them in West Africa. We do it. When I grew up seeing that, if you confide your cows to somebody, the first born from the cow and the second one will go to the owner, but the third one will be automatically, owned by the person who is taking care of them. So you have a chance to build your own little herd as you go along. So I think this is very common also. A second example is if you take Takaful, remember the story about Takaful. We are a Muslim society in the Senegambia, in dominant Muslim majority societies in Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia, part of Nigeria. Yeah, and so this is something we know. It's also these are practices that we are seeing. And so many of the practices of giving exist in a broad range of geographies and cultures, and the philosophies are also quite similar. We tend to share what we have, and we do so when and as the need arises. It's also important to note that the various ways in which people are encouraged to give. Right? Giving is encouraged from everyone according to their capacity and their abilities, what they have. One saying in Fulani and in Wolof, in many of the West African languages, is to say that the hand on top is better than the hand underneath. So better have your hand on top rather than having it underneath, which means better be the giver rather than the one receiving. Right, and so it's an encouragement to give. It's an encouragement to donate, and the hand here is a metaphor for the relationship and for what be the one contributing, be the one going out and sharing what you have, rather than be the one always at the receiving end.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our celebration and conversation today. I want to start by acknowledging with a lot of gratitude the origin behind our framing of this conversation being Sankofa, and that is Nana from Waxy. As you all know, Sankofa is an Akan concept, which means go back and get it. It reminds us that generosity, care, solidarity have always been our most enduring form of infrastructure and source of solidarity. So today's conversation is a very public one. We're exploring these traditions beyond formal philanthropy infrastructure, how they show up with young people, with creatives, with businesses, with all of us. So we are really just talking about the practical realities of how these traditions actually work and how they connect to how we think about research and how we think about the future of philanthropy in the continent. So we are shaped by our traditions and our cultures. And this, of course, has evolved over time to look different. And so this is also part of our ongoing efforts to, one, document all these traditions across the continent, identify interconnections across these traditions, but also work together to explore pathways for leveraging these traditions in how we expand the conceptual understanding of Africa philanthropy, in how we inspire and think about technology as an infrastructure, and how we also think about mobilizing for causes across the continent. So again, this is not just about the webinar or one-off conversation. It's a distributed campaign where communities, creatives, activists, all of us are invited to not only celebrate these traditions, but to help us document and build a conversation and connection to the work that you're doing. So I'm so grateful to all the partners who have worked with us in this journey, and just to know that there is so much that has been done in this space, and we want to continue partnering with all of you to not only understand them, but also to create a space for them. So I am inviting my colleagues to lead this conversation with me. And Wale, welcome and all the best.
Sankofa teaches us something powerful. When we return to our wisdom, we don't go backwards. We move forward with strength and clarity. My name is Ogo and I work for Trust Africa. And throughout my work, I've seen how generosity traditions still shape us. They aren't just stories we inherited. They are the reason our communities continue to stand. I have watched ordinary people come together in extraordinary ways. A burden that felt too heavy for one person became lighter because the community stepped in. And we're seeing the same values show up in new forms such as digital saving circles, community-led funding, and movements built on shared care. As we gather today, this isn't about romanticizing the past. It's about recognizing that collective support, shared responsibility, and shared prosperity have always been our foundation, and they are still exactly what the world needs now. Thank you for being part of this journey.
We want to talk about generosity. I think when we observe the life in many fields, on all fields. We understand that the source of life lies on generosity. I'm a musician. When I pick up my guitar and write a song, I never think that this song will stay just for me. I want to share it. Even I pass all these nights and all this time to try to find the melodies, the rhythm, and also to be in touch with myself to make it more sensible for people just to appreciate it. But I want to share it with people without asking anything else, just a thank you if they find themselves in what I'm doing or what I'm giving to them. It's generosity. And I think in one of my songs, when I say, if ever you have more than the others in your experiences, in your goods, in everything you get, and you got it from the source of life, like I say, it comes from God, the best use for it is to share it with people who needs the support. And it will always come back to you. Generosity for me is what makes people to be able to be together. Even more than the people, every creature on this planet use generosity, use exchange. When we breathe, we bring something out and we give it to the oldest species around us. And by them leaving, they give us something that inspires us and makes us say that we appreciate life. So I think sharing, giving, supporting, educating, without any intention, just to say I want to play my part to make people, to make species, to make creatures to be happy, to be healthy, and to move forward. That kind of generosity is what I want to share with you today. This is what makes me going on the road, playing music, sitting down with people, exchanging ideas, looking at someone and say, if I can do something for him or her, very good to help, I will always do.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for those messages. And these messages will also still be available. We'll be sharing them. So please just follow and share. And please note that today is a very special day before I bring Bas, because today is Giving Tuesday. For those who have been following all the emails, I received like 3, 4, 5 emails, including the one I even got from a community I belong to, from community of Christians. It's very interesting to see how Giving Today's work has gone through different communities across the world. So we're speaking about this in a very important day, and I will share more a bit about what Giving Tuesday is about a little bit more. But today we have very important and everybody's important, by the way, because I think this is an open conversation. But we have people who have made commitment to be here with us today. We'll hear from them about the work they've done in the past and what they're currently doing. And now these are all people who are extremely passionate. I just saw the cover even Tindai posted and the one that Sean posted, and it was interesting to see what Miriam posted. But we have very interesting speakers today, 3 of them who have worked at a different intersection around how do we promote African businesses, how do we promote African stories, and what are we doing to change the narrative about the continent. So let's welcome Sean, Miriam, and Tindai to the conversation. If you are here, please just, I think I can't see you on the video yet, but if you're here, it'd be good to see you come on video, and you can spotlight them once they're about to start. But maybe a quick way to just introduce everyone. I think what will be easier is we just jump straight into it. So I'll just start with Miriam just to do a quick introduction. Miriam, please just share a bit about the work you do. I know you have a different you wear different hats, but just share a bit about yourself in 1 minute, what you do, a bit about yourself, and then think about what is that one proverb that you shared, a bit about why you shared that proverb, and then we can jump into the conversation around the generosity practices across Africa. But in the meantime, just share a bit about yourself, and then share why for your proverb, and then we jump into the conversation after
Okay.
Tinda and Sean has introduced themselves. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Mariam Bukar Hassan, known as Alhan Islam, and I am a poet, spoken word performance artist, and I'm also the UN Global Peace Advocate. My work really lies at the intersection between art, advocacy, and strategy. And I started this work when I was 13 years old, accidentally, and somehow it just metamorphosized into, let me say what I would call a lifestyle, because I decided to say to myself that I would do this for the rest of my life because of how I have seen words impact people and how it has changed mindsets. The reason my wife was sharing the proverb or the quote that I did, which is share from what we have provided you. It's actually from the Quran, and it is something that I really hold dear. It is my belief, and of course, if something that you believe in does not impact you, then that thing that you believe in is not important. So why I shared that is because it reminds me at all times that when you're blessed, that you should also extend your hands to the next person, and you should support the person. So yeah, that's why I shared that from the Quran. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you. Sean, do you want to go next?
Thank you, Wiley, and thank you for the invitation to be here. So my name is Sean Samuels. I'm the Managing Director of SGS Consulting. We're based in Johannesburg in South Africa. We have a number of programs. I'll share sort of one or two. The one is building the philanthropy infrastructure in Southern Africa. We're doing this in 6 Southern African countries. And when we refer to infrastructure, we're talking about community foundation, support organization that in turn are building community foundations in their respective countries. We are focusing a lot on the local community giving and the assets orientation to development. And as we will, I suppose, in our conversations further down the line, we'll be talking about some of the thoughts around the solidarity economy that we are actually focusing in on, just given the fact that traditional philanthropy is failing us in many respects. And as we know, we cannot control an agenda if we don't control the funding, if it doesn't belong to us. And so I think there is a significant potential, and I'm very happy around this conversation and around the symbolism of the Sankofa. I think that's incredibly important. I put in the point that says I am because we are, you are because I am, because I think that we are interconnected as people and as communities, that we cannot, in a sense, exist in our own right. And I think the whole sort of area of African generosity is based on the fact that we are selfless and that we support each other, and that we cannot see ourselves grow and prosper and succeed, but without each other. So that was what inspires the Ubuntu sort of thinking. Yeah.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Tinda, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. I believe it's afternoon for almost everyone who's on the continent. But if you're in the US, good morning. So my name is Tendai Morisa. I'm with Civio Institute. We work around building philanthropy of more or less what Sean was talking about, the philanthropy or the generosity of the poor, of the ordinary citizens. We work around building networks of community foundations. But I think what is more interesting about our work, so that I don't bore people, is the work that we do in terms of encouraging individual giving through our individual giving platform called Africa Giving, where we have managed to hack the technology that you can give from wherever you are in the world to an organization that of your choice that is in Africa. That's sort of the work that we do around sort of supporting philanthropy. And I shared a Shona proverb saying, "Kandiro kanopfumba kunova kamwe." In Ndebele, the equivalent would be izandla ziyagezana, but it speaks about solidarity, that we are connected to each other in everything that we do. Kandiro literally is a plate. When you say kanopfumba kunova kamwe, there's always an exchange. If there's a shortage in the house, you go to your neighbor, they give you some salt, they give you some sugar. So our society is actually based on that solidarity economy. And that's what we're trying to see if it can translate into formal giving platforms, that form of solidarity, that understanding, like Shona has talked about, Ubuntu, I am because you are. If we can translate that into institutional settings, forms of giving, because we have seen our ideas here in Africa are being taken up by colleagues in the global north, and they're making a lot of money. So if you look at something like GoFundMe, it's literally an African concept where we've always believed that we solve big problems together. So we come together, we put together money in a stokvel, mukando, ukuqokozela methods, and we come up with money and we fix problems. How we've always fixed problems as a society, whether it's death, whether it's marriage or whatever, we've always come together as a society. But when we see all those innovations and they move across the Atlantic, they become money-making schemes. Many people are now recognized as inventors. My challenge at the moment is to say, how do we take these African ways of doing things or practices or innovations and to really scale them up so that we can actually begin to plug the hole around the funding challenges that we're facing at the moment.
Thank you so much, Tendai. And thank you, Sean and Miriam, for sharing that as well. I think I think it's just powerful to just hear how you sort of like started to connect the dots to some of the things you're seeing in your work. But I think my first question to the three of you, and I'll start, Miriam, you can jump in first, is to think about from the work you've done and some of the system we've had work like Ubuntu in the financial system. We hear Esusu, we have cooperative bank system. We in the Igbo land, Igbo culture in Nigeria, for example, there's a lot of age grade in how people support themselves and all of that. And so I wanted you to share with us during the course of the work that you're doing, what are some of the traditions we've seen that's worked in the past, that's also still being sort of adopted. I think, Tinda, you already mentioned that. That's some of the things that we're seeing, and it's good that you mentioned GoFundMe. Because I think that even in the continent, anytime somebody needs some help, they call into the community. You would assume, for example, it's only HNI that will sort of support this work. But we've seen consistently that across the continent, there are a lot of communities, families, individuals who come in to support people, including village education that they've given, village scholarship, beg your pardon, village scholarship that they've given. So in the course of your work, what are some of the generosity practices that sort of like shaped your own upbringing or shaped your work or your community in any way, the direction? And in that sense, think about the tradition and how we're modernizing. I think that you already mentioned that giving that we have as a culture is part of what you're saying, show off, whether it's in GoFundMe and the rest of them. And also think about, I think it was great also speaking with Sean earlier this week and last week and talking about what are some of the things we should be thinking about and the agency of grassroots communities to be involved in transformation of their society. And also, what does that mean from generation to generation? So my first question is, with the work that you do and some of the system you've seen, what are some of the practices that you're seeing that shaped our community, shaped the different sectors depending on where you work? And just share a bit about that with the audience. And for the audience, if there's anything that you want to put, and those listening to us or those who are on live stream, watching us live stream session, please just send in questions. And also please put the hashtag Giving Tuesday. It's important. I think we'll share more later on. But at this point, I'd like to invite Miriam to just kick us off into the first conversation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wale, for your question. I think for me as a storyteller, a lot of people have spoken about Ubuntu, which definitely teaches us that our humanity is shared. We've also heard about esusu, which in Hausa we say asusu, which is like still the same thing of saving, of putting together money. There is also adashe, where I'm from, where basically you take turns in putting money, and then the next person takes it all, and then the community saves the money again, and another person takes it. It's almost like a savings cycle. And there you can say like communities create safety nets long before even like modern banking understood the word microfinance, which also came with like this belonging of responsibility. But as a storyteller, for me, what really shaped how I see generosity isn't just about giving money. It was actually giving presents, especially where we would have like the dendeli. When I used to go to Miranga when I was a kid, we actually used to play under the moonlight, where you would also have our great grandmother, Haja Isa. She would share stories with us. And that kind of also shaped your character growing up. So in itself, also, it kind of speaks to what Sankofa stands for, which is going back to wisdom. And in that setting, for me, it was the elders sharing their wisdom with the young ones under the moonlight, or having the fire, our own mini bonfire, but with the elders. And so that's really what shaped my own understanding of generosity, that it wasn't just about giving money. It was also about giving presence, giving community, and giving that sense of you're not alone. And so like today, my work in peace building beyond poetry and women's empowerment and culture is also grounded in the same logic, that we need to understand that the grassroots is not the bottom, that it is actually the backbone. And we see also the world now seeks efficiency a lot of times over empathy. But these traditions remind me that our first understanding of agency actually comes from community. So that is how I see generosity from the work that I do and what shaped my understanding of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you for bringing that. Sean, do you want to go next?
Okay, so I really like the picture of the elder sharing with the younger under the moonlight. It almost become a song. Maybe we can encourage Bala now to create one. I think we have to accept, and we know, and I've experienced that we have a rich and sustained tradition, not only of giving but also of saving. And I think that that's quite important. Almost our own natural social safety security net that has helped families lift out of sort of extreme poverty. And I think that that's quite important. We've seen incredible examples, and I think earlier on in the videos, giving and sharing via livestock or agriculture or time or just a question of presence, especially when somebody passes on, that kind of social cohesion and support are things that we don't necessarily count in currency, but is certainly extremely rich and it's there. So African generosity is definitely embedded in our culture, in our thinking, but also in our social and solidarity economy. I think part of the work of my work is bearing witness to incredible examples of agency. And yet, on the other hand, with sadness, how we also undervalue, in many respects, this incredible sort of community economy that actually exists. We know it's there. We're all part of it. I mean, I think some examples were given by Ubuntu. If you look at the stockpiles in South Africa, for example, that savings amounts to just under 3 billion US dollars per annum. And yet we would spend time and energy in having to try and draw on these smaller sources of foreign aid when we are not, in a sense, harnessing, having to unlock or having to catalyze this sort of community-centered economy that actually lies before us. And I think a lot of examples are unfolding around the broader idea of a solidarity economy, which includes the faith-based, and I think we've heard some of the examples of that, includes the diaspora giving, includes the onset of cooperatives, and then the Stokvel example, and I know there's Tuzu in Ghana, or the Chamas in Kenya, and Joe in Nigeria, etc. There are a lot of these configurations. And even at the last conference that we had around impact investing, there was a lot of lamentation around saying we have these significant assets in our continent, and yet we have not found a way, or we're not giving enough attention to how we can harness and catalyze that. It remains undervalued, and I think this is the challenge that we now face in terms of even sort of saying that the reciprocity, which is a key characteristic of our traditional giving, actually inspires collective resilience. It's about supporting each other and growing each other, because it's based on networks of trust and mutual aid. So I think that those are some elements, and I think I'll stop here, but those are some elements that also gives me hope that we can adapt the traditional ways of giving and bring it into the modern world. So it's almost from tradition to modernity, into urbanization, which is becoming a new reality for us, and even to the technology that lies before us. So let me leave it at that, Wiley, for further sort of questions. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that would I would definitely bring you up into that conversation, because you mentioned a very important component of one of the catalytic way finance is being used in the world, which is impact investment. And what are some of those things we're learning from our own tradition that we can bring in? But before we go into that, Tendai, maybe you want to bring your thoughts into this.
Sure. Okay. So I think my entry point will be it takes a village. I think that's what we've sort of used in many instances when it comes to Africa in terms of raising a child. Almost everyone, when they've made it, the list of people to thank is endless, yeah, in Africa. And it's because of that fact that home was never just the boundaries around your 3 or 4 hearts, but it took like the village. And related to that is then, I always say this to colleagues who want to study African philanthropy, to say, you may fly into Africa, fly into a country X, you're not going to say an address or an office to say this is where philanthropy happens, because our giving is part and parcel of who we are. So I think years ago, I talked about what I called ephemerality of philanthropy. At times, this is when concentrated amounts of philanthropy happen, but in response to something that has affected a society. It could be like Cyclone Idai here in Southern Africa, COVID-19. We began to see increased levels of solidarity. We began to see communities coming together. I always say that there's a lot that is then spoken of as the heroic response of maybe governments, ODA, NGOs, or formal philanthropy in terms of how they then responded. But we do not have an understanding of what happened in the first 24 hours or 48 hours of a cyclone. When you begin to ask the stories, that's when you begin to understand that communities came together, made sure that those who have been displaced had homes, made sure that those who did not have warm clothes had blankets, etc. So by the time any responders from outside that community enters, the community will have done the job that is required to get the things rolling. So that's number one. It's very important for us to understand how communities act as first responders in a crisis. And this, it takes a village kind of sort of framing. Then when we look at most of our people, Africa is still a very rural society. Most of our people are engaged in one way or the other in smallholder agriculture. When you begin to deploy questions about who helps you in terms of labor shortages, in terms of input shortages or crop failure, the first response is never an NGO, philanthropy, or whatever. It's the communities themselves. It's the institutions that are not set up or that you cannot see visibly, but they know that they are there. There's something, there are coded practices around, in Isindebele, they'll call it Ispala Senkos. This is the granary of the king, the granary of the chief. So that if there's any family that had crop failure in that society, they'll go in and sort of get relief from there. Before we even talk of governments, welfare systems, every community is embedded within them that kind of sort of societal mechanism or response. But the challenge that we have with all these terminologies is the big trend right now in Africa is two things. Africa is the fastest urbanizing continent. Our people are moving into the urban areas very fast. And that movement is not organized around, say, a factory, whatever, whatever. So strangers are coming together. And it's difficult to replicate these practices that I've made reference to in the urban areas, which is part and parcel of the work that we have to do. We've seen some sort of models in low-income areas in the southwest of Zimbabwe and Bulawayo, the second largest city. There is a process called, it's when there's a funeral. Communities without being, you're going to get a knock on your door. They're going to ask either for a cup of meal or some money. Yeah. Have I lost you, Ole? No, I haven't. So we're beginning to see that in the urban areas, but it's not as pronounced as we see in the rural areas. So I think our challenge, without just trying to talk about this beautiful framework around how we are organized, is to begin to look at how we've been disrupted by the entry of urbanization and also capitalism, which has created atomized families. There's this attempt at nuclear families, because we never had nuclear families. But now there's this attempt at nuclear families that are just concerned about the immediate children, etc. So I think our challenge, even in this conversation, is to begin to say, how do the things that inform African society from its raw base, how are they being imported or exported into the urban areas? And how can they be replicated to scale, but also to be an immediate response? Because what we're actually seeing is in the urban areas, especially the middle to upper income areas, they're so isolated. You don't see those practices that we had in the rural areas. So I think that's the challenge, to say, at what point do we break away from those cultural practices, and at what needs to be done? So some of the work that we're doing around Africa Giving is a reminder of that solidarity economy where we come from, to begin to say, we've always fixed big problems together as a society, and we're able to do this. But I think the third challenge that we face as a continent is that, as we're talking about increased resilience, solidarity, the continent itself is bleeding. We're losing more resources going outside. So the capacity or capability of many of us living in urban areas to be other concerned, to be concerned about others, also diminishes given the pressures that we have in urban areas. So I think there's work to be done in the sense that we have a foundation, but we risk losing the cultural foundations that we have had for centuries because of urbanization, increased poverty, and increased unemployment.
Wow. That's a lot there's a lot to unpack there. But I'm so grateful to just hear you talk about the urban rural migration. And I think there is a connection point to what Sean had mentioned about the impact investment component, because a lot of the impact investment is also looking at how do we sort of turn this sort of environment into vibrant economies. I remember when I was in Kenya. I was at a Tafari Castle in Kenya. And it was interesting to hear the story of Tarafaya Castle, um, how the resort in itself was built by the communities, and how some of the people who work in the hotel actually have a lot more say than the founder and the owner of the business itself. But it was just to show that the African economy is shifting, and how can we use all of those things. But I want to go into the second question as we were talking about that, because a lot of the thing you're talking about is, and how do we then innovate this tradition? Because as you know, when we do the migration from, we talked about rural area into the urban centers, we are losing a lot of that sort of history, but also in practices, whether in agriculture, I know even in housing system, where, communities came together to work together to help build homes. And what that means, even if you see today we now have cooperatives that people now, put in money to sort of build homes as well. So there are a couple of practices that are really evolving into that space. I think in the course of the work, what I would love to add, my question to you next, and I think for the audience as well, think about if you have any contribution in the group chat. I'm going to be on the lookout for that. And for someone that's helping me monitor the social, if there's any question that's coming from that, please also share, and we can pass it on to our panelists. But just to think about what are some of the evolving practices that we're seeing today from those things, traditions that we've seen in the past across border. And we've seen the diaspora do this consistently as well, because they are also giving back to the communities. They're giving back into education. They're giving back into health. They're also helping in real estate. There's a lot of conversation happening around how do we mobilize all of this. But I think the question to my panelists is, how do we innovate this tradition, the culture? What are you learning? What are some of the traditional values you've seen that's coming into philanthropy, into the impact investment, as Sean also mentioned, that we can all sort of start to think about, particularly given that the audience all work in different sector. It'd be good to hear some of the emerging innovation that's happening during the course of the work. I think, Sean, you can go first.
Okay, I think I think the points that Tendai made was extremely important around urbanization. We often joke here in South Africa, if you're coming from a rural area into one of our townships like Alex, etc., nobody's going to give you a free cabbage. And like our Black consciousness advocate Steve Biko once said, a black man and maybe black woman, you're on your own, And so it raises some very fascinating sort of issues around that if we have been involved in traditional giving practices, and it may involve livestock or a starter pack for a couple that has just got married, etc., we cannot necessarily transport that into an urban environment. But can we take the principles behind that and bring that into the modern world? And I think that is the difficulty that we, in a sense, sort of faces. Is how do we translate? And I think this is where the Sankofa symbolism is so powerful. That can we take a traditional practice that comes out of a rural, that comes out of the past, that maybe it's been undervalued, and can it actually be repackaged from a principles point of view in a modern sort of urbanized sort of environment? And this is certainly some of the work that we, in a sense, are trying to look at. One of the key issues is around the assets orientation to development. It's actually getting our communities to realize that they do have assets. I think through the processes of colonization in South Africa, apartheid, etc., our Black communities were almost in a sense convinced that they have very little. But in fact, and of course, the orientation has always been, so what is it that you need as opposed to what is it that you have and how do you build on that? And we've seen some examples of where communities and where Stockfeld and others have started to use their economic power to begin to shape their sort of a future and their development. And we've seen some examples of where they are shifting from being beneficiaries to co-invest. And I think part of that co-investment in your own development does a lot of things. It raises the confidence levels, it facilitates ownership. And in fact, all the things that the Stockfile represents, trust-based funding, locally led, all of that is what key donors are asking, in their funding sort of approaches. And yet we have perfect examples of those happening at the grassroots level. The only problem is that we are not speaking to it, we're not elevating it, we're not profiling it. And so just one key issue, there's nothing that stops us from unpacking that sort of economic power and linking it to issues like pension fund, linking it to blended finance instruments. But of course, we first need to get this level of economy, the social and solidarity economy, to be recognized and respected. I know the African Union has also developed a strategic framework around this, focusing on social enterprise development. And I think there's two key things. The one key thing is that we cannot navigate our way to prosperity and development through aid. We need to do it with relationship to capital. We need to do it with job creation, enterprise development, and other. So I think there is a lot of potential for even Stockfeld and other forms of giving to begin to be reframed around not just the band-aid kind of giving, but how do we give to sustain? How do we give to grow? And how do we give to scale? So two key things. The one is pipeline. If you talk diaspora giving, is where's the pipeline? How do we access? If we talk about Stockfeld, where's the pipeline? And of course, the other key issue is capital and how we can actually get capital. So just a quick example, Wiley. In South Africa, we have the first national bank that is very proud to announce that they hold about 16 billion South African rands in the bank. And yet the question to them is, but what are you offering the stocks on? The only thing you're offering is a free account. Yeah. But you're not treating them like a high net worth. They're not getting preferential sort of treatment, etc. And so there's a lot of work that we need to do in order to shift the level of recognition and understanding of the power and potential of community-driven and led economy and sort of development.
Hello.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Tendai?
Sorry,
Please.
it came as a surprise.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
Yeah, so I think I want to build upon Sean's sort of comments, because I think we cannot talk of philanthropy without talking of production. Yeah, I think that's very important for us in terms of framing. So if you look at practices that have emerged from our cultures, I'll go to Kenya, then I'll go to Nigeria. If you look at Kenya, real estate that is in Nairobi and on the outskirts of the CBD into other areas, there's a lot of an understanding around coming together through a Harambee or other mechanism to build infrastructure. And through that, when we're beginning to create our own value as a people with an alternative financing model, then we can begin to even allocate a surplus based from that. So I think it's to look at, first of all, to look at how we can produce together the collective forms, because the moment we have this urbanization, all of a sudden, the dominant model of accumulation teaches you individualism. That teaches you how to go to the banks, secure funding for yourself, etc. But when we look at what is happening in what we're calling the informal, the stokvels that Sean is making reference to, the Harambes, etc., you'll understand. Then if you go into in Nigeria amongst the Igbo, the artisanal program of setting up, where somebody comes and is trained for 4 years, 5 years, then is helped to set up as a business. Just imagine if we're doing that as a program itself, to say we're setting up youngsters who want to be entrepreneurs, but they have to go through mentorship, they've got to learn, and they do that. So that's number one in Nigeria. Then if you look at the relationship between Nollywood and the women in the marketplace, at its formation, when Nollywood was emerging, that relationship, that symbiotic relationship around dependence, but also funding, a very unique funding model to say that you could actually have a short film funded by women so that they could have the CD so that they can sell the DVDs. So understanding, locating all those, was we're engaged in an activity where we're trying to locate all the things that are happening at the margins of the economy, the things that are not being recorded even in GDP, but that are happening and sustaining families. When we begin to understand that and begin to say, how do we unlock and replicate this at scale? And now you go to what you used, Wale, as an example around remittances from the diaspora. But for countries like Zimbabwe, which have all of a sudden, the diaspora is now the second largest source of foreign currency. But it's also a very, it's a first generation diaspora. It's not a mature diaspora like the Ethiopian diaspora or the Nigerian or Ghanaian diaspora. So when you have those diasporas, you begin to say, what are the models, not only of saying they should come back home, because at times the rallying point is weekly framed around come back home, come and live. Zimbabwe is now better, Ghana is now better. But to begin to say, how do you leverage the advantage of being there, create collective capacities there, and begin to build institutions? We've been helping a team of doctors that are based in Australia. They're trying to build a hospital in rural Mwenezi in Zimbabwe. And they have come up with what you may call a Harambe, and they are putting together resources and they are building. And they're not even thinking of coming to practice medicine at that hospital. They're even thinking of hiring doctors there. So there are many things that we can begin to think about how we sort of evolve from the cultural practice that we have. Because our cultures, I always say to people, our cultures were predominantly very economic rather than social. There were a lot of economic considerations and how we're organized rather than the social. Because I think at times we valorize maybe how we would sing or how we dance, but that was always at the end of a festival. The deliberations of the festival, in most instances, are missed. So if you go into a Khotla, for instance, what is in South Africa and Botswana, there's a lot of discussions around the economy of that area, etc., and what needs to be done. Once consensus is reached, then there's a celebration. But half the time, people have misunderstood our cultures to think they're mostly about celebration without understanding the background to when we get to the point of celebrating.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think I just love the idea of what you both shared around how do we take this forward, even from the lesson of the diasporans. And they don't have to live where they are. How can we use their voice in the local? I think my final question to uh to you all is how do we imagine forward? Given that we've seen a lot of challenges from the startup ecosystem to grassroots NGOs who are trying to sort of support to even institutions that are trying to provide some guarantees for lending, whether to the creative sector. It was good to hear you talk about the creative economy bit and Nollywood. And if you look at all of these things, the reality of the way the funds is moving away, sort of like dwindling when it comes to the African continent. How do we then reimagine generosity becoming mainstream in our conversation? Because I think in all that we've heard today, there has been a conversation on how we are. I think it's already in us. I think humans are naturally good. I think the society and the narrative also sort of like push us into where we then have mental modes and become a way of, we now have a way of thinking. But in thinking forward, in some of the things that we need to do, and because of our audience and the different people that are here, how do you think we can bring generosity at the center of African leadership? How do we bring it into conversation around trade? It was so brilliant, Sean, that you talked about the pension fund, because I know that some of the work that I did in the past, we're talking about how to use a blended finance approach, particularly in bringing consortium of businesses together who are working at a different intersection of, whether it's health, whether in agriculture, whether in creative space, we have education, we have quite a bit. But even in terms of collaboration that we're seeing, that the new way of competition is collaboration. How can we bring generosity into the mainstream? So how do we bring this into the DNA of organization? Because I think, yes, CSR is good. It's good to give some of our, religious standpoint to give a lot of things. But how do we institutionalize all of these things? So that every time there's a call to action, every time there's something about how do we leverage our own resources, the opportunities that are here, because Africa has huge opportunity. There are many, many businesses that should be scaling across Africa. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's something's working in Kenya, something's working in Zimbabwe, it's working in Zambia. How can we take that same model and support the ecosystem? Have an ecosystem approach. So in summary, how do we sort of think forward with all of these things? And you can share maybe based on the work you're doing, or some of the example you're seeing that is working, and you can share that with us. I think either Sean can go first, and I think Miriam has dropped off. Sean, you can go first, and then Tindai can help us close that out. And then we do have one more spotlight that I'm going to bring in right after this question. Sean, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Okay, so I think there's a whole range of things, and I know that our time is sort of limited, but I think the one key issue is around partnerships. And just coming out of the G20, we had significant and incredible conversations, between philanthropy and also with capital. But sometimes when you deal with corporates, etc., there's a lot of things that they don't realize or can't see. So I think evidence on the first hand is very important. I think we need to. Our narrative is normally we must, without us in a sense putting forward. So we're very good at admiring our problems, and we're very good at analyzing and indicating intent. But I think we need to use our social capital. We need to learn from each other. We need to speak a lot more to each other around actually defining possibilities. So think about this as a possibility. It's also about language. It's also about understanding who we're dealing with. So if you're dealing with a fund manager or you're dealing with impact investing, we can't just come with our NGO language and our philanthropy sort of discourse. We need to understand how we, in a sense, move beyond the notion of collaboration and rather seek opportunities where we can look at the strategic alignment of interest. And I think it's not always sort of easy. I think social capital, not social capital, the social media is extremely powerful. We don't elevate profile, we don't tell the stories enough. But apart from telling the stories, we're not necessarily making the connection to different sectors around possibilities. And so we tell the story and we sort of leave it at that. And I think that that we in terms of our sector, we need to be engaging a lot more with each other. We need to be sharing a lot more each other's stories. We need to be a lot more pragmatic in our meetings, in our conferences. Quite often we have conferences in the continent, we walk away, all we've done is to discuss. We haven't delivered, we haven't produced, we haven't reached any defined sort of commitments. So I guess what I'm saying, Wiley, a lot of the behavior changes on our part to become a lot more pragmatic, a lot more intentional, a lot more evidence informed in finding solutions. The whole idea of the Sankofa that I like is also about intergenerational, which I think was mentioned right in the beginning of our conversation. And this is about how we understand and treat elders as knowledge custodians, but then linking them with young people as the innovators of today and the future. And the question is, how do we facilitate those engagements in a more pragmatic and meaningful way so that we can actually take advantage of our experience, take advantage of our technology, understand the kind of challenges that we're having to confront and find solutions rather than spending time analyzing the problems.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Tendai?
You know, Sean is very provocative. We could end the conversation here. He's done a great job already. I think I'll sort of summarize it use two terms, then I'll go into them. I'll start off with mimicry and also outsourcing of our agency. So I think the mimicry is in the sense that we've looked at other regions of the world and we've tried to replicate in terms of institutional formation what they have, and we've put it on the continent. But it has not worked. It's an experiment. At times we're a continent that thinks we can have an NGO-led model to development. It has not worked. We've not seen that happen anywhere else. And number two, the NGOs that we've created or that we have now have become silos. They are closed boxes. They're not connected to the communities that they serve. So right now, as we are in the midst of a major transition, a major shift, a paradigm shift of sorts, where funding is being disrupted. The traditional ways, what we knew of our funding towards NGOs, has been disrupted significantly. But when you talk to actors in the sector, there is an assumption that there's another door opening that will give them the funding in exactly the same way. So there's a reluctance to respond to the challenges, to innovate, and to become different. So the terms that we're using here around being a social enterprise, et cetera, are not resonating with many in the space because there's this thing, and I don't want to call it entitlement, but there's this thing of expectation that there is a source of funding. And yet, and this is the contradiction, the resources are here in Africa. And Africa's generosity remains strong, but we've just not been able, based maybe on storytelling, aligning what we're doing, how we communicate our impact and the work we're doing. We're not connecting with what so if you're talking about reporting to a certain donor community, it may work. But reporting to citizens that you're expecting to give in small parcels of money or corporates that are in that community, then your storytelling has to change. You have to align with what is seen as a need in communities. Because some of the things that we're pursuing were not resonating on the ground, were agendas that were established elsewhere. So now we're in a place whereby we really need to rethink the model, but to realign with community needs, to map agendas together with communities. So that's something that we have to do. Then this outsourcing of our problems, it speaks to the privileged in our communities and also any African organization, agency, even our governments. I'll use one example. The GBV space, we're in the 16 days of activism. The majority of organizations that work to respond to GBV 60 to 65% of their funding was coming from foreign donors. So when you ask them to say, who funds you? Yet we have a problem in our society, but we have outsourced its solution to foreign donors. So we have a major problem in terms of saying, how do we, because like Sean is saying, we can spend so much time about talking about problems, but we don't fashion solutions. Because our challenge at the moment is to say, how do we fashion solutions given our cultural practices that we have to say, how do we respond to GBV? How do we respond to poverty? How do we respond to drug abuse amongst us? But at the moment, we are failing to do so because corporates had never been brought into conversations, real conversations about how their practices, either as mining companies, as large agricultural estates, and just as corporates, they actually foster gender-based violence, especially around month-end cycles, payments, etc., to begin to say, capital, you're complicit in this problem. How can you partner us in resolving? So capital did not even know that it was fermenting a problem on the ground. So it outsourced it to donors who are outside. But when those donors go away, these organizations that were doing incredible work at the front lines are now challenged, and there's no one coming to help us. So I think we're at a moment whereby we need new kinds of conversations, framing around what Steve Biko said, that black men, you are on your own, Africans, we are on our own, but we have resources. It's just that we're not aligning the needs that we have. So for instance, I'll give you an example. Our governments are busy talking about the ease of doing business, but they never talk about the ease of resolving social problems. Because most of our organizations that are involved in social problems are not only facing a funding challenge, they're also facing a compliance challenge. Registration is becoming more difficult, compliance is becoming more difficult. And yet these are the organizations that are keeping society intact. So we have that contradiction at the levels of power, and the levels of capital to fix these problems. Despite the fact that we have a very rich traditions around problem solving, we've outsourced this problem to others. But now is the time for us to rethink and to begin to reinvest in fixing social problems that we face. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think that this is the perfect time to sort of like segue into what are some of the examples that the creatives are doing? Because I like you said, we need to amplify this work, and nobody's coming to save Africa, and that's why we need to start to think about the work that we need to amplify quickly. So we have a spotlight that we want to do. PD Wilson, if you're there, please come on. PD Wilson will share a bit about himself, but he's been working using music, creative work, to share about, he has a very solid festival called Finding Home, where he's been using it as a tool of sort of like sharing some of these history traditions in Africa. So PD, quickly jump in, introduce yourself, and share a bit about how you're using your work in itself to demonstrate that, the young people, creative, the youth, and Local Network can sort of help us in amplifying, the lessons of generosity. And also, how does it, with the work you're doing, how is that translating to sort of mobilizing a movement around those things? And then after that session, we'll sort of wrap it up with our call to action. PD, if you're there, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Can you see me? Hi, thank you so much,
Yes.
Mr. Wale, for
Yeah.
this opportunity. I am exceedingly, immensely grateful and honored. And thank you to everyone who has been enlightening us on the culture of generosity and the state of the world as we speak. Thank you so much. I've learned a great deal. My name is Peter Wilson. I am a singer, I'm a songwriter, I'm a producer and a cultural curator. I'm the director of Feeling Creative, a multidisciplinary creative house. I'm the founder of the Finding Home initiative, like Mr. Wallace said, fostering wholeness, community, and belonging. And finally, I'm also the music and creative director of acclaimed vocal group 121 Selah. I grew up in a home where family was never defined by blood alone. My father had a quiet and unshakable policy that if someone was in need, we make room. And he meant it literally. At one point, we had 16 people living under our roof. Friends, family, friends of friends, church members going through a hard season, travelers stranded, anyone who basically just needed a soft landing and a little hope. My father would always say, hey, shift small. Let us make room for them. And honestly, not like my father was a very wealthy man or that we had a very large space, but really the miracle that I experienced as a child was just the fact that at every juncture, my father was always willing to make space. And I see from that heritage, something very powerful, a principle, a strong conviction that stood at the intersection between cultural morality and spiritual Christian conviction. He would always, every single time, teach us to recite the words of Acts 20:35 that says, hey, I've told you before that so laboring, you ought to support the weak. And remember the words of our Lord Jesus Christ that says, it is more blessed to give than to receive. These were the verses that rang in my younger years. And so finding myself 33 years after, in a place where, as a curator, as a singer, as a songwriter, as a leader of a vocal ensemble, what do I do? What's my mission? That's the question. What do I do with music? I realized that because of the indoctrination, because of the experience, because of the heritage that I've received from my father and from my family, because of the lived experience that I cannot deny sits at the core of my heart, I can but see the need to do the same work of indoctrination for our young people. Today, we're living in times where, I mean, in fact, considering the 12-year longitudinal study that was done, how that thousands of people now, and I mean, especially in the younger generation, have placed far more value on self-expression and autonomy, forgetting the old traditions of community and security, of communal living and generosity. I feel there is no better time than now to define the purpose of music, to define the purpose of storytelling, to define the purpose of wanting to be an artist. I get it. The economy is not so beautiful and amazing at the moment, and it's forced many of us to want to self-seek. But I, as an artist, because of my story, because of where I'm coming from, because of my convictions, I have been able to figure out how we can use the same platform as instruments and tools of change, of transformation. And so when you look at music, Andrew Fletcher said, let me write the laws, let me write the music of a nation. I don't care who writes its laws. And so you see that philosophically speaking, there is a back end through which we can use music and storytelling to invoke action. Yes, I mean, when you just read history, you realize that for generations, African societies have used songs and proverbs and chants and oral stories to teach children what textbooks could not, how to live, how to share, how to belong to a community larger than themselves. And so when you look at that, you realize that there is no better time to consider using these tools to shape the next generation. No better time than now. People are really not practical, logical, but we realize that there are so many things that they are doing that they themselves, when they realize that they are doing those things, they may not even believe, because philosophically, art has shaped the back end of their motivations. They now do things because music instructed them to. And that's what we see happening to our young people today. And so if we really want to drive Sankofa forward, I strongly, from my position, believe that music and stories bridge the gap between memory and imagination, bringing and connecting all that we have as our spiritual heritage to what the future holds for us as a nation. And so we want to use art to make people remember the resilience of our elders, to make people remember our shared poverty, times when they literally lived on little. They had little, but they didn't mind sharing the little that they had. I mean, there were times like that. I really think strongly to say that art must be used. And this is where I stand as a cultural creator and as the director of the initiative Finding Home. Finding Home is initiative that's a living example of Sankofa, basically. We want to connect people back to their anchor. We want to connect people back to their roots, back to their foundations. Even if they never had those foundations, we want to show them that there's something that we have experienced in the past that worked, that made room for people, that made for communal living, that made existence easier for us at the time. And if we employ all of those, if we weigh in on all of on if we weigh those moral absolutes on today's innovation, yes, AI, yes, innovations are everywhere. We're enjoying the beauty of technology and innovation. But then if we only just can weigh those things on what we have today, we would really have a much more cohesive experience as a people. And so with the Finding Home Tour, we want to help people rediscover their emotional, spiritual, and cultural roots. We want to create spaces where people see that giving is not a weakness, it's a heritage. We want to help people, we want to remind people that their story has value and that shared healing is a form of communal giving. Also, we want to make sure that with our music, with our storytelling, with our art, with our fashion, we are able to return people to the memory that empowers the future. There's memory that empowers the future. It does not hinder it, it does not impede it, it empowers it. And so this is where I stand, and I'm inviting whoever it is that is interested in just exploring this frontier of musical indoctrination, this frontier of storytelling that keeps memory. And like I said, connects that to deep convictions. We want to be able to have you join us and just help us move this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, PD. Thank you so much. And it's just great to hear how you're using your storytelling and art to help share. We're about to round up. We're about to close up now. I just wanted to check if there's a quick question from our audience. Any question that we can take? You can have one, two questions. I see a hand raised up. But BDB, anyone
Oui.
that wants to
Allô?
any question? Yeah, hello?
Oui, allô?
Yeah, can you hear
Oui,
us?
d'accord. D'accord. Bon, moi, c'est Amouzou Kossivi, le premier responsable du chapitre SPAC depuis le Togo. Je voudrais aussi profiter de cette occasion pour vous parler un peu de mon histoire, ce qui m'a motivé à continuer la générosité jusqu'alors. Tout a commencé dans un village, dont je suis d'une famille traditionnellement un peu pauvre qui fait des activités champêtres. Mais il n'y avait pas de limite pour dire que chacun ait son champ ou pas et qu'on ait des nourritures ou pas. Allô?
Ok, allez-y s'il vous plaît, je vais
D'accord.
interpréter
Donc,
comme vous
je
continuerez.
disais, c'est par rapport à mon histoire où j'ai vécu dans un village où
I
ma
was
maman
saying that I
n'avait pas de
lived in a
fournière.
village where my mom could not help
Donc,
us. My mom was
euh,
very
tout ce
poor.
qu'on tout ce qu'on gagnait dans le champ ne servait pas à grand-chose. C'est pour aider juste la communauté. Donc, nous, on
All
n'avait
that we
pas la
were
chance
doing
d'aller
in
vendre au
the
marché.
farm wasn't, désolé, all that we're doing in the farm wasn't enough to feed us.
Donc, quand on revient à la maison, quand elle prépare la nourriture, peut-être c'est d'aider deux personnes qui n'ont pas trouvé à manger, ou quand elle voit que dans une famille, il n'y a pas de fumée jusqu'à la tombée de la nuit, elle s'approche de la famille pour dire, bon, vous avez déjà mangé ou pas, donc on dit non, on n'a pas trouvé. Donc, elle prenait son temps là pour partager un peu de nourriture que nous avons. Mais moi, j'étais fier parce que, bien même
So
que la
there's
famille
something
n'avait
that she
rien,
would always do. Désolé. There's something she would always do when she comes back from the farm. She would cook for us. And even when she doesn't have enough to eat herself, she would still share with children of the neighborhood that had not eaten. So even though our family did not have enough, allez-y, s'il vous plaît.
d'accord. Donc, bien même que la famille n'avait pas grand-chose, elle prenait le plaisir quand même d'aider deux personnes. Donc, nous, on trouvait en elle cette générosité. Donc, on se disait aussi, quand on sera plus grand, soit que si nous avons les moyens, on pouvait construire un orphelinat, ou soit avoir un cadre pour pouvoir aider d'autres personnes aussi.
So when we saw that, as soon as we grew up, we told ourselves among the siblings that with this, because of how our mother showed us generosity, we were going to build an orphanage to help as many people as possible.
Et depuis ce temps, la vraiment motivé. Après mon BEPC, donc je suis entré directement au mouvement international où nous allons sur le terrain pour pouvoir faire des trucs, que ce soit pour des matchs ou aller civiliser des communautés.
And immediately after high school, I got into international organizations that help communities, that teach generosity, and that's how I found myself here today.
Et je peux vous dire aujourd'hui que je suis devenu un grand de tel point que tout ce que notre maman nous transmettait comme valeur, la générosité est devenue une valeur que nous avons pu développer. Et moi, je vous dis, après, j'ai intégré une organisation de solidarité internationale qui faisait cette activité, intervenait dans le domaine de la santé, l'éducation et l'environnement. On allait vers la communauté, soit les sensibiliser ou soit prenait les enfants qui ont des lacunes à l'école.
So I would say what I know about generosity was from the value that I got from my mom. And I got into an international organizations where we go into schools and we help children, special needs children, and we help them freely.
Et après cela, j'ai pu servir dans l'ONG pendant 12 ans. Et depuis 2 ans déjà, j'ai su mettre en place une autre association qui continue toujours dans ce même sens-là pour pouvoir aider les enfants.
And since then, I've been able to build an NGO where I've been working for about 2 years, helping children, and more children will need help.
Amazing.
Et avec la force de la jeunesse, je vous dis aujourd'hui, je ne sais pas quelle force nous anime, mais si on veut dire en termes de rassemblement de la jeunesse, moi je suis toujours fier parce qu'il y a les jeunes qui sont tout le temps avec moi sur les activités que nous organisons.
And with the strength of the young people around me, we were able to do so much. I'm so proud of the young people I work with.
Thank you so much, peace.
D'aller vers que ce soit les établissements scolaires où nous avions des clubs scolaires, que ce soit le club environnement, club santé, club secourisme, et en même temps, il y a d'autres clubs que nous sommes en train d'envisager, mettre en place pour pouvoir être plus proche de la jeunesse et aussi transmettre cette valeur de la générosité dans les générations à venir.
And we were able to create different clubs, health club, and clubs just to help the young people give back to the society. And we're hoping to do more in the future.
All right.
Merci.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jose. We have to move now. We have to close now. But thank you so much, Peace, for helping us translate that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think it was a great way to close it out because it's just great to see your real story in the room and for the work you're doing. Thank you so much, Jose. Just to close us out and to thank everyone for being here. Really, really grateful that you've been part of this conversation. I know there's a lot of wisdom, there's a lot of lessons, there's a lot of information, and hopefully we'll share this information. It's still going to be live documents, live videos, and share a few things after this, and also follow the conversation online. But before we close, I just want to have a quick call to action from our speakers. Unfortunately, Miriam is not here and Alan is not here anymore. But Sean, thank you so much, and Tindai. But as a way to just close us out, what is our Ubuntu? What is our call to action? And I see you've talked about many things, G20, pension. What is one action step we can begin to take in our work for all our listeners right now? And as we take that forward, just help us just close it out. So Sean, maybe you can start and then Tindai can close us out.
Again, there are so many things, but the one key thing is I like the idea that was expressed around, I think you were saying it, Wiley, that we need to record these giving practices and collectively develop a proof of concept around how they could feasibly sort of translate from the transition to modernity. I think we need to come up collectively with some solutions and some concrete ideas so that we can actually convince others about the feasibility of that.
Thank you so much, Sean. Tindai?
Okay, wow, that's a good one. I think, from this outsourcing of our development, I think there's need for a huge mindset shift to appreciate, because I hear this from policymakers, office holders, everyone talking about the need for somebody to come do something for us. Others are looking for FDI, others are looking for aid, etc. I think the call to action for me is to say we need to change our minds. We really need to change our minds and own our problems, begin to forge African solutions, and begin to look for resources of how to fund them. Because we've been waiting for too long for God to come, for a Messiah to come from across the Atlantic, but it's not happening. And it's not going to happen. So the quicker we realize that even as non-profits working in this space, we need to look for different ways of raising resources so that we can stay afloat and remain relevant to our communities. And even for communities themselves to begin to realize that some of the problems we face, we can fix them ourselves if we collectively come together and begin to mobilize resources that we have. It could be money, skills, etc. But there's a lot that we can do if we work together. So there's a lot around collaboration and mindset shifting that needs to be done.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think that we have one more question quickly, Sean and Tindai, before we just wrap it up. Maybe just a quick, either one of you can take that. How do we bring FB organization into thinking forward agenda and harnessing the potential of its position in our society into bringing transformative change? Anyone that can help us answer that?
Sean, you want to go ahead?
FBO meaning the faith-based, right?
I think so.
Wiley?
Yes, and yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I think some of the work that we're certainly doing in South Africa is that we are trying to in a sense, promote, but also we want to try and quantify what faith-based giving looks like. We know that our Muslim giving, I think by far sort of exceeds that of the Christian giving. We have been challenged just as a matter of interest in South Africa by a UK-based Muslim charity called the Human Appeal to help them set up a Muslim giving organization here in South Africa that will take advantage of the zakat giving and other sort of elements. And so this gives them opportunity to begin to shape what Muslim giving in particular, in this case, could look like. And how do we extend that giving beyond just issues around food security, which is important. A lot of giving is around crises, but we also want to extend that to issues like gender-based violence and and to encourage giving to also begin to help catalyze other resources and contribute to other sort of areas of development. So it's something that we are actively sort of working on and something that we have prioritized, certainly in our work here in South Africa. And I think there's opportunity in other countries as well to, again, it's about understanding the scale of this giving. Sometimes we underestimate it, and to bring that into the mainstream, just to center that kind of giving in terms of all the elements that we've been talking about here, in terms of alignment of interests and how we link that to capital and how we access it via the pipelines that we are certainly now trying to understand and actually engage. I don't know if that answers that, but that's just our experience now at the moment in South Africa.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you so much. It's been such a rich conversation, and thank you for all the insights. I think we'll be able to get all of this together and share some of the key lessons here. And hopefully we can also think of how we can collaborate beyond just this conversation and action it. I think it was one of the things, it was good to hear that we shouldn't just talk, and no one should be coming to think, to be thinking about development is going to be left for outsiders. We have a role to play. But before we close out, I'd like to invite Catherine, who has been one of the brains behind this conversation, but also is the director of Giving Tuesday Africa Hub, just to sort of like give us a bit about why today is significant and why we're also doing this. Catherine, over to you.
Awesome, Wale. I guess mine is very brief. First, to thank you all for sharing your thoughts. As I said earlier, this is a public conversation, a conversation we are taking out to the world, not just to share what we know or what we have, but also listening to how these cultures and traditions are actually practiced and are evolving. Not forgetting that today is Giving Tuesday, a global day and a global moment for us to not only celebrate, but also inspire people to give. I hope that you feel inspired, not just to celebrate these traditions, but also give and inspire other people to give. I also just want to note that this conversation doesn't end here. We are taking this movement to everyone else around us. There are so many other opportunities for you to get connected, for you to lead these conversations in the spaces that you occupy. So for those who asked how we want to take this conversation forward, please look out for more information on how you can participate and how you can be engaged. So happy Giving Tuesday to everyone. Thank you, Ale, for leading this conversation with us. And I will not forget to say that Sean Samuels is a co-leader for Giving Tuesday South Africa. So a special thank you for you for taking time off Giving Tuesday planning and activities in South Africa to lead this too. Thank you so much, everyone. For those who will require video and a recording for this, that will be shared right after this call. Please feel free to share this with all your networks, and let's keep celebrating our traditions and cultures beyond today. Thank you, Asante Nisana.
Thank you, Katrin, and thank you, everyone. We have a feedback, please. Bidem, you can share that quickly. People feedback, just help us fill the form quickly. And also, we have some tools that we can also leverage. You can scan for a free resource so that we can share with you. So just take the feedback and help us just share a bit about that. This conversation is not going to stop, as Catherine said. And some of the very key insight our speakers shared with us is also going to be available, whether on TikTok, on Instagram, also on LinkedIn. We share a bit of that as well. And if you're thinking of how you want to be part of this movement, part of this conversation, next year we're going to be doing a lot more conversation, pop-up, and also there will be some campaign from some organizations. So hopefully we would have many points of collaboration. I think one final thought for me as we close is it's a lot easier to do good. I think it takes a lot to be wicked. And I always say to people, like, it's a lot more to do good. And I think that I always say that Africa is a place where we have both the soil and the people are rich. When I say rich, they are rich in many forms. And we talked about rural areas today, and I was sharing a lot about like how Africa is contributing towards the green realities of the world today with our forests. And we're losing a few of those things, but our practices and all of those things. So there is a part of us that is good, all of us. And I think that as we think about Giving Tuesday today, let's see how much we can help in the government. There's a lot of division right now. There's a lot of division in faith. There's a lot of division in economic classes, in education. But in the end, we're all human beings. And if we can see that beyond just the fact that we're all striving for a better life, we can do it together. And I think that's the biggest lesson. And we can honor those who have shown us how to do it and move these things forward. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for all the people that are doing the back work. It was brilliant to see peace coming. I struggled with, I couldn't have understood what the friendship, but thank you so much for all the support you've given. And hopefully we'll take this forward from here. So I think if there's nothing else, everyone, please just share a little form of greetings to say goodbye in a one-word close in our group chat. Just say something, and if it's a proverb, it's a quote, just say goodbye, or you share a word, leave us with a word as we close out. Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you so much, Tendai. And thank you to Alan as well for coming up. And also thank you to Bidemi, who has been doing an incredible work behind the scenes.
Je crois que moi, j'ai un test derrière que vous avez là.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Donc, la paix commence par un geste de générosité. Voilà.
Thank you. All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm seeing all the chat. Mercy, please. Okay. All right. All right. Bidemi, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye. I will close out the live stream.